This is an MTM production.
Political dissent begins with the vaguest feeling that something is wrong, and a lot of people have that feeling. There's a general sense today among young people that we've been lied to.
We're gonna fly on this jet that costs $500,000 per flight.
Unemployed and low-income migrants who are unable to afford housing are key contributors to the poverty rate.
To gold-trimmed sitting and dining rooms. New focus tonight on the layout inside Mar-a-Lago.
What do I do with the gold on my finger?
This one's gonna be a doozy. Roll the intro. I said roll the intro. Okay, super duper quick disclaimer. There are a couple subjects in this video that some viewers may consider sensitive, and if that's the case, you can go ahead and click off now. If not, we can keep going. But also, please note, I am an entertainer, not an educator. Nothing I say in this video has been corroborated by a third party, and do not use me as a source for any academic works, okay? Do your own research. With that being said, you can roll the title card. Dude, it's not gonna be funny the second... Okay, let's start by defining our term. What the fuck is glamour? Well, the Oxford Dictionary defines glamour as
an attractive or exciting quality that makes certain people or things seem appealing.
Well, that was vague as fuck and didn't answer my question at all. So I'm gonna do that thing that video essayists do where they like cut to the disembodied voice explaining shit with pretty little pictures behind it. Yeah, do that.
Glamour is attractive. It's opulent. To be desired. But who gets to decide what's glamorous? In Pierre Bourdieu's book, A Social Critique of the Judgment of Taste, he discusses taste not as a personal subjective experience, but instead as reflective of the cultural hierarchies that structure society.
You see, Bourdieu views taste not as an instinctual fact of nature that we're just inherently born with, but rather as a product of our education, upbringing, and most importantly, class. It's kind of like a nature versus nurture thing.
Social subjects, classified by their classifications, distinguish themselves by the distinctions they make, between the beautiful and the ugly, between the distinguished and the vulgar, in which their position in the objective classifications is expressed or betrayed.
Or, if you wanted to explain it in a way that doesn't make you seem like a long-winded blowhard who died 50 fucking years ago, you could say that expressing similar cultural tastes to somebody in the same class as you isn't really individualism at all. If anything, it just confirms our social norms. So, Emily, it's not so crazy that you actually went out and splurged on a Gucci purse. That's actually really fucking normal. But how many Gucci slides and Prada bags is it going to take for you to consider yourself worthy of being a real person?
Our aesthetic choices, whether deemed beautiful or ugly, are influenced by the class in which we grew up and are a part of. Cultural taste doesn't just maneuver freely through a society of individuals, but instead it is used to structure that society through distinctions. You see, those with high levels of what Bourdieu calls cultural capital, a collection of social assets such as education, intellect, or style of speech and dress, set the standard of what satisfactory social interactions are in a society.
So what is considered good taste in our society then? Well, here in the West, we typically consider good taste to be related to wealth, whiteness, masculinity, and power. Anything considered too foreign, feminine, queer, or poor is typically called gaudy, or tacky, or tasteless, too colorful, if you will.
Tacky as a concept refers to the lack of cultivation or the resistance to taste, and more often than not refers to tastes that are not suitably conservative. That which is elegant can become tacky if it becomes less exclusive and more easily acquired.
The word tacky was originally a noun, a Southern American colloquialism used in the early 1800s to refer to a small or cheap horse. There's also a breed called the Carolina Marsh Tacky, though only a few of these horses remain. The word evolved to mean an ill-kept or ill-bred horse, then to mean an ill-bred person, and finally, by the mid-20th century, it would become a modifier of the quality of items owned by or associated with that ill-bred individual.
But why do we care? Couldn't we just do our own thing and all get along? Yes, Emily, if we lived in a perfect world, that would be the case. But unfortunately, we do not. If your name is Emily, I'm so sorry. That's just the first name that my brain comes up with. Anyway, that can be extremely difficult to do, seeing as that we've been trained our entire lives by our upbringing and our proximity to have a specific kind of taste. Now, do you have to agree with that taste? No, absolutely not. Nobody's saying you have to. But I mean, it's not illegal to go outside of the bounds of social norms, but it rarely goes unnoticed. So what's shame? Shame is the social enforcement of our cultural taste.
The tool that we use to teach what is acceptable or not. But shame isn't usually based on anything real or substantial. I mean, no one's gonna shoot you if you speak too loudly in the theater. I mean, most of the time. The volume for how loud is too loud isn't set in stone or written in law. It's more of a vibe.
If I were to eat with my elbows on the table, I wouldn't be arrested. I didn't break a law. I broke more so a social standard.
The invisible code of conduct we built on top of the real rules. The basis of social shaming is usually arbitrary and ever-shifting, and based on time and place as well as other circumstantial variables. But regardless of this, it shapes the world around us.
In good ways, like keeping people from cutting you in line or slamming doors in your face. But like most good things, there's always a downside.
So where do the queers come in to all of this? I'm glad you asked. You see, everything that we've discussed thus far has an interesting point of intersection that begins about 50 years ago in New York. And if you're smart, you may have already guessed where this is going. Ballroom culture as we know it started in the early 1970s. Picture this: drag queens, transgender men and women, and other gender non-conforming individuals across many different races and ethnicities drinking together, dancing, and some might even say, having a ball.
Get it? Because, like, ballroom culture? They can't all be winners, okay?
Ballroom was a way for the poor, queer, feminine, and foreign to get together outside of the white heteronormative capitalist hellhole we call America. They'd throw balls and hold pageants with prompts like regal royalty or executive realness. The themes of ballroom culture were often a way to express taste and opulence that wasn't usually awarded to marginalized groups. There's a documentary that, if you're queer, you've probably heard of. Paris is Burning is a chronicle of queer culture in New York City, with a focus on ballroom, voguing, and a community of individuals cast out by society, but brought together by the attraction or taste of those individuals. The documentary was later used as inspiration for the FX show Pose. And I could go off on a tangent here about the countless illegal raids of these balls and the villainization of trans people, and that's not even to mention the AIDS crisis. But this documentary does a much better job of explaining it than I could. And you can also find queer obsession with glamour in modern media as well, such as Queer Eye or RuPaul's Drag Race. What we see in these shows, for lack of a better term, is The overcompensation of glamour, almost in an attempt to mask the hardships of being marginalized. Now, I'm not saying that RuPaul doesn't like doing drag or that Jonathan Van Ness doesn't enjoy doing hair, but what I am saying is that there's a very strong connection between constantly being told your entire life that you aren't good enough and the desire to be perceived as glamorous. I remember growing up as a little queer kid in the middle of nowhere, Mississippi, and I would monitor how I walked, how I spoke, how I dressed, how I sat, how I acted, how I thought. Any minute mannerism that may indicate the slightest bit of a feminine flair that was too much for someone with my genitalia, I would immediately fix it. And to deal with that, from a very young age, I decided that if I was going to be queer, I had to be perfect in every other aspect of my life in order to make up for it. And the idea of queer excellence isn't something new. I didn't come up with it. It's been around for a while. And the same concept applies to people of color. Anyone outside of the margins of what society deems as culturally appropriate have to work extra hard to be taken as seriously, given as many opportunities or access to the same resources. In a capitalist society where good taste often signals class affiliations like wealth, social status, and power, marginalized communities are then forced to contend with the false promise of the American dream. Do you remember that vague feeling that Natalie Wynn was talking about at the very, very beginning of this video? This is it. This is the lie. The lie of the American dream that we've all been sold. This idea that if you just work hard enough, that the meritocracy will grant you the life that you desire. But in a country with consistently rising housing prices and a stagnant wage growth, that promise has been broken. While it may be true that anyone can achieve the American dream, one thing is for certain. Everyone cannot. And there lies the true crux of the matter. The disallowance of certain groups of people from obtaining the American dream, unfortunately, isn't an accident or some bug in the system. It's actually a built-in feature. Capitalists require a large reserve of unemployed laborers because a large reserve of laborers allows the capitalists to pay you the lowest wage possible and make you work under the worst conditions possible in order to maximize their profit. And you ultimately have no say in the matter because there's 1,000 hungry, impoverished, and desperate individuals ready to take your place at a moment's notice. And when it comes to the hiring and firing, marginalized individuals' heads are on the chopping block first. And this is why, in my personal opinion, that glamour has a particularly special relationship with these marginalized groups. When the material conditions of true wealth have been kept out of your grasp, the aesthetic of opulence will just have to do. And so, the moral of the story is, if you got it, flaunt it. If you don't got it, find a way to flaunt it anyway. Have a good day, guys, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.